Her name is Kerry Slone. She's the founder of We the Female. She is an expert. She is a gun instructor, and she travels the country fighting against these kind of red flag laws, trying to promote these things. So please give her a little warm welcome for me.
Hi, everyone, and to those of you watching the live stream, and for those that will be watching this later, as Alex mentioned, my name is Kerry Slone, and I am the founder of We the Female. And We the Female started, as a lot of activism does for a lot of us, or advocacy, as I like to refer to it, by accident. I am a domestic violence survivor, and I don't even remember, because one of the things you lose with PTSD is you actually lose the ability to sometimes remember dates. But about 17 years ago or so, my ex-husband beat me for the last time after we were already separated. He beat me so badly that on Thanksgiving that he was arrested on felony domestic assault charges and a DUI because he'd already fled the scene by the time the cops got there. Fast forward to Monday when he is being arraigned, and I sat with a female prosecutor, and you can imagine what I looked like 4 days later, right? The bruises had come up. I was literally bruised from head to toe. My teeth had been fractured. I wasn't able to eat for a few days because the inside of my mouth was cut up so bad that I couldn't chew anything. My face was swollen. And when I say literally head to toe, I mean my ankles, torn tendons. I had fingerprints around my neck where I had been picked up, thrown across the room. I'd been sexually assaulted. And I sat with a female prosecutor who looked at me and she said, "We're going to drop the DUI charge, and we're going to drop the felony domestic assault charge to a Class C misdemeanor and offer him a plea bargain for a diversion agreement." And I looked at her and I said, "Why would you do that?" And she said, "Well, it's usually hard to get convictions on abuse cases," which is true. There's some truth to that. And I looked at her. Now remember, this is a female prosecutor, and I'm sitting black and blue in front of her. And I said, "I'm willing to testify against him." And she looked at me and she said, "Are you sure about that? Most victims don't want to testify against their abusers," which is also true. And I said, "Hell yes, I want to. I don't want him doing this shit to anybody else." All right? And she still gave him the diversion agreement. To which, conveniently, he stalked me afterward, because that's what they do. Because in their minds, it's my fault that he went to jail, right? Fast forward to the next part of that conversation. After the arraignment's over, the law enforcement officers that arrested him came up to me and asked me if I had a place to hide for 3 or 4 days. Well, that was confusing, as I'm sure you can imagine. I said, "Well, yeah, why?" And the law enforcement officers said to me, "It is far more likely to have violence escalate now that he is getting out of jail than what you've already experienced." 2 takeaways there, right? Clearly, it's my fault that I put him in jail, because how dare I, want him to stop beating me. And second, those cops knew that restraining order that was put in place, that no contact order, was going to be useless. They knew it. But they didn't tell me to learn how to defend myself. That was in Washington State about 15 years ago, before it got really bad. So, of course, he stalked me throughout this time. I ended up getting diagnosed with PTSD because I went to therapy and did what I was supposed to do. Interestingly enough, there is data out there that shows, I know we can get data to show anything we want. I worked for John Lott at the Crime Prevention Research Center, so I know how that game works. Interestingly enough, he actually has some pretty good data to the other, and we can talk about that in the panel here in a little bit. But there is data that actually shows that the second highest affected demographic of PTSD are domestic abuse victims, men and women, behind veterans. But we don't hear a lot about that with domestic abuse victims like we do veterans, right? But you know what you do hear about it with veterans, with PTSD? Red flag laws. When you hear about these red flag laws put in place, veterans are one of the biggest talking points. We've got to keep veterans safe, and they're mentally ill. In fact, until recently, and I mean real recently, last couple weeks, I don't remember the exact date, if a veteran went to the VA because they needed help figuring out how to get their benefits, they were flagged as being not mentally capable of owning a gun. Did you guys know that? I asked you a question. Did you know that? Did you know that veterans were flagged if they went to ask for if they needed help figuring out their benefit packages? If they had to go into the VA and ask for help because they were confused, because, clearly the government makes everything easy to understand, right? So it's kind of like they set you up for it, right? They set you up for failure. Conveniently enough, you go in and you ask, they could be denied. Also with Social Security. Same thing with Social Security. Apparently, if you need help getting your veterans benefits and you need help filling out your Social Security forms, you're not mentally capable of owning a firearm. Now, fortunately, that did just change in the VA. That was a Gun Owner of America win, so congratulations to Gun Owners of America on getting that flipped. That was a big deal. But who are they still not talking about? Domestic violence victims. But you know what they do talk about with domestic violence victims? Gun control. In fact, so much so with red flag laws that they're written into the Violence Against Women's Act, which is a federal law that is supposedly there to protect domestic abuse victims, including the caveat that says if an individual is convicted of domestic violence, they become permanently banned from a felony domestic violence conviction. They are banned from owning firearms. Well, all you need to do is turn on your social, as they say out, I live way out in the country in Georgia, like way out in the country, and as they say out there, if you turn on the Facebooks, or the, everything's the Facebooks, the Walmarts, you can see how many domestic abuse survivors end up getting killed because the broken justice system continues to let these guys back out. So the two biggest pawns for gun control being domestic violence victims and our children, right? As we can, if you looked at these patterns. Well, about 6 years ago, in Washington State, some of you may have known this if you've been in the gun rights game for any period of time, there was a law that was passed right after the Stoneman Douglas shooting, titled I-1639. Does anybody remember that? Do y'all remember 1639? Well, there was all kinds of stuff in 1639, right? Mandatory 10-day waiting period. You got to go through this online safety course that talked about suicide and mental illness. I'm trying to think of everything that was in it. There was like 70 different firearms that were in it that were labeled assault rifles, right? Essentially redefining what an assault rifle was, or an assault weapon. Side note on that, like 15 or 20 of them weren't even manufactured since like the 60s or something like that. That's how old the list was. I read it to a friend of mine, and he's like, where the hell are they getting that? There's only like 500 of those in existence, and they haven't built them since 1960. I'm like, man, I don't know. That's the people that are legislating you. That don't actually have an idea what's going on, right? So this ended up getting funded by the big guys. Paul Allen's family, obviously the state of Washington was all in on it. Seattle, pundits and wealthy people in Seattle put millions of dollars into this. It gets passed by like 65%. But what was in it that they didn't market or tell anybody in the fine print, which, by the way, violated the state constitution and how a petition should have been written. It actually was taken off of the ballot, snuck back on at the last minute. This is some of the crap they do. You guys need to pay attention to this stuff. Was a caveat that says, y'all want to listen to this, because if you don't think it can happen here, you better watch it, because y'all have a healthcare red flag law bill coming up, and this is how they get that crap in, okay? In the state of Washington, when you go to purchase a firearm and you sign that 4473, that background check form that gun control advocates think doesn't exist to buy a gun, because we couldn't get lucky enough to just buy them out of a truck somewhere. It ain't that easy as buying oranges at the Walmart. Boy, wouldn't that be great? Back in the good old days, right? It is a waiver of your medical record in the state of Washington, and the state of Washington Public Health Authority can deny you the purchase of a firearm based on what they see in your medical record. Now, we all know they're not looking for a broken arm. They're not looking for a broken leg. They're looking for PTSD, right? They're looking for depression. They're looking for any sleeping medications, anything that they think that they can flag to deny you the purchase of a firearm to keep you safe. I spoke out against that as a domestic violence survivor because I did what I was supposed to do and went to therapy and had those 4 magic letters that they were really looking for on my medical record, PTSD. And I said, for those of you that voted for this, let me tell you what you just did to me. You just put me in a position to not be able to potentially, right, because they don't define anything in that, and that's something I'd like to talk about on the panel, is like it's not how legislation is, little digression, it's not how legislation is written, it's how it's not written that usually bites us in the rear, and people don't pay attention to it. So I could be potentially denied the purchase of a firearm to protect myself against the abuser that was stalking me. Now, my friends all knew he was stalking me. I was a very prominent business owner. Gave all that up to be here with y'all today, actually. No regrets, and glad I did it. But, oh, you're welcome. That's not why I said it. It's just, at some point, you have to decide where your priorities are. And first of all, mine was getting the hell out of Washington State and going somewhere that was gun-friendly. So I live in Georgia. Woo! But, what's that? Kentucky's pretty gun-friendly. Alabama's pretty gun-friendly. Alabama's really gun-friendly. Become show and tell down there, by the way. I'm totally digressing off this conversation. You mentioned to somebody your firearm instructor, and it became like I went and bought a car, and they're like pulling these guns out of their pockets. It literally became like a show and tell. It was kind of funny. Washington State, it's like, oh, she said the G word. So I could be potentially denied a firearm purchase in the state of Washington because I have PTSD on my medical record. I spoke out about this on my social media. Oh my God, I had no idea. I'm so sorry, my friends, right? The responses. I'm like, well, you didn't read the bill. Yes, we did. No, you didn't. Because ironically, it was the only thing in the bill that was written in plain English. It was just at the bottom in the fine print that wasn't in the summary. So the bill was not fully disclosed. Everything that was in it, which is also something that happens at literally every level. Do not think that just happens at the federal level with these omnibuses and all this crap. It happens in your states. It happens in your cities and your counties. So do not forget that they do that crap all over the place, and it's always write a check, right? So certain people got a hold of that. Fast forward 6 years later, here I am speaking about gun control laws and particularly about red flag laws and how they can negatively impact us. Red flag laws can be used against abuse victims, right? They seem like they're great in theory, right? We're going to keep them out of the hands of violent abusers. Well, we all know they're going to get the gun if they want one anyway, right? That's going to happen. First of all, I wish it were as easy as they all think it is to get a gun. Second, I wish I could get even one of the things that half of these people think I can get a hold of. That'd be great. Like this Ellison, did you see this? This 1,200 round, can shoot 1,200 round a minute Glock. I'm like, where are you buying that? Asking for a friend. Where are you getting that? So red flag laws not only can be used against a victim by her abuser to make sure she's either disarmed or will be disarmed, right? If there's guns already in the home, the abuser, I have people come to me like this all the time. In fact, there's a firearm instructor, a good friend of mine in Washington, California. She left a very prominent member of the community as a firefighter and had been a multi-generation firefighter in her small community. He wanted to hurt her badly, legally, and try to take the kids. He had her red flagged because she was a firearm instructor and she couldn't make a living because they took all of her guns away, especially there, right? So they can be used. Another one that they can be used against, a lot of people don't think about, is my organization is one of the only organizations that I know of that actively advocates for male abuse victims. And so those laws can also be used by women against men too, for whatever reason. In addition, the threat can come into place when they're trying to leave or they decide that it's over. Well, I'm going to tell them that you're mentally ill and you own guns, right? It's a technique to keep them in the relationship. I've seen that as well. one of the biggest things, and I've been on actual podcasts and interviewed by mental health care people that are not anti-2A. I wouldn't say they're pro, but they're open to the conversation, which is in itself is big, right? To be able to get in that conversation, right? And they didn't even think about it. But abuse victims, when there's laws like that written, will not go get the mental health care that they need for fear of being disarmed and not able to protect themselves. So there are a lot of problems with red flag laws that people don't think about, and they disproportionately affect women, especially when you get into things like these boyfriend clauses and things. Have y'all heard of the boyfriend clause? Well, you better pay attention because they keep trying to sneak that in the Violence Against Women Act. In fact, it just got written out, and they're trying to backdoor it and bring it back. Essentially, I go on a date with Alex. It'd be kind of awkward since we're both married, but let's just say, right? I don't want to go back out with Alex again. Right? Found out he was married. Awkward. Alex doesn't like that. So Alex can report me as being mentally unstable and get me red flagged and disarmed. That's the boyfriend clause. In short, right? It's a little bit more convoluted than that. That's the Reader's Digest version for our purposes today. Okay? Fortunately, that has been bumped out a few times, although there are states that are looking to pass that legislation. And this is where I think you need to look for it. And one of the places that I wanted to talk to you guys about this is the Bipartisan Safer Community Act. We're going to get more into this when we do the panel. Are everybody familiar with that Bipartisan Safer Community Act? Everybody lost their minds over the Bipartisan Safer Community Act because it was going to defund schools that had shooting and archery programs. Very few people knew that it also created a giant slush fund to educate and provide outreach for states wanting to enact red flag laws. Did y'all know that? Look at y'all, and y'all are gun rights activists and you didn't know it. So that was also passed in the Bipartisan Safer Community Act. And what just recently happened? What did Kamala Harris just do? She created the Red Flag Resource. I don't know the exact acronym. I'll get to it in the panel. I've got it written down on my notes. She just created this whole resource center. It literally says in the description that this resource center is designed to support enacting red flag laws through the Bipartisan Safer Community Act. So are you guys beginning to see how these dots connect? It may not be just one little law. And here's the thing. And here's why you have to get active in your state. And I'm going to leave it at this and we'll go to the panel. First, you can't use logic because you're not dealing with logical people. I worked in the beauty industry for 30 years. I started when I was 12, in case you're doing the math on how old I am. Particularly when you're dealing with women who are the biggest advocates for gun control, you have to use emotion, you have to use emotion, but don't get emotional. You have to push that emotional button for them. More importantly, you have to let them know how that is going to affect their lives, right? Because otherwise it's that redneck NRA, and I'm not poo-pooing the NRA, let me be clear, but it's that shall not be infringed mentality that's always marketed. But there's data that proves that women are more, I think it's over 60%. I'll look it up for you. We do the panel, but over 60% of women will tell you that the Second Amendment isn't about shall not be infringed them. It's about being able to protect themselves and their babies. So somewhere in there, we have to change part of our conversation about how we're reaching people. We have to let these people know, especially women, you want to change things, get the women involved. Like, look what's happening with kids right now in the school districts and stuff. Why is there pushback and why are you seeing it? The mama bears got involved, right? Although I prefer mama raccoons because they're a little crazier. And they have thumbs. Just saying. Mama trash pandas. You cannot sit there and give them logic and data. They don't care. And they're just going to give you their rehearsed data on their side. But the minute you push the button with emotion, You will change the conversation. I've done it. I did it when I confronted Kamala Harris, not with her, because that went about as well as you would have expected. Right? That was literally the look on her face. But with some of her followers, some of her little minions, I said it's unfortunate that she doesn't want to support doesn't want to have a conversation with a domestic abuse survivor about red flag laws. That's what I said. They immediately went into their talking points. Immediately. And I said, well, I'm the domestic abuse survivor. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? That's awful that you went through that. Right? Their need to show me empathy was bigger than their talking points. So I followed it up with, well, those red flag laws you support can be used against me and prevent me from being able to purchase a gun to protect myself from my abuser that's stalking me. Needless to say, that was my mic drop moment and I walked out. They had nothing. And that was my moment when I realized that's how you've got to get to people. You cannot continue to do it the same way. You can't sit there talking crap on the internet all day long. It ain't going to get you anywhere. You can't sit there and give them facts over emotion because they're not hearing it. But if you push the emotional button, they will hear it. They may not flip in that moment. But now they will look at you as somebody they can come to and ask more questions, especially if you know them personally in your personal life. Because now you're not the crazy NRA gun person, especially if you're a woman. And that is what needs to change. The other thing that really you need to focus on, and especially you got that red flag law coming up here, y'all can all push back against that and get it tabled. Here's the thing though, do not think, and stop using that language, you're not killing a bill. They never get killed. They just put them on the back burner on simmer until they think they can get it passed. Ask me how I know, Washington State. All right? So the minute you get that mentality in your head, you stop fighting, right? Look at Colorado. Colorado had that. We killed it. I'm like, no, you didn't. Sure enough. What happened? They got it passed, right? They got that AWB passed. Focus on your communities where you can actually create change. You are not going to create change at the federal level. Especially the longer they've been in office, the harder it is to get rid of them and the less they listen. But your county commissioners, your mayors, your sheriffs, your school boards, all of these things, all of these elected positions can be changed if you push back on it. And look, you're already watching what happens here, right? What's happened here in Nashville? What's happening in Knoxville? What happened in Memphis? These states are flipping, right? Because of these big cities. If you do not stop it now, you are going to see your state turn. I know it because I watched it happen on the West Coast. I can literally give you the playbook how they do it, and they're doing it now. So you better start paying attention, and if you do not know how to do it, get a hold of you're welcome to get a hold of me, or get a hold of these Tennessee Taking Action individuals, and they will teach you how to read the legislation. You need to learn how to read it because the stuff, I have a really bad mouth, because the stuff that they really want passed, they sneak in, and they don't put it in those highlights. That's how you're going to create change. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is something that we have as an unalienable right. Blessed to have guaranteed in our Constitution. Our founding fathers were smart about that, right? But my idea of liberty is going to be different than yours. My pursuit of happiness is going to be different than all of you. And nobody really gets involved until their pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness is affected. So show them how these gun control laws, especially red flag laws, because they get those in under health bills, they sneak them in other ways, negatively impacts their pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. And then you can start seeing some change. Thank you for having me out. I hope that this was informative for y'all. And get your ladies involved. Get your women involved. The ladies that are here, are you all registered to vote? Are you actually using that vote? I see some laughing in the background. We said yes, but that means we're not, right? You'd be stunned at how many women are not registered to vote. And it's appalling. Because the minute you start voting, especially for your gun rights, watch what happens. They're going to get scared. And that's where you need to have them, because that's where all politicians should be, scared of us because they work for us. Don't let them forget it. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Miss Kerry Slone. Miss Kerry Slone from We the Female.